Welcome to the Nonprofit Voice, which is brought to you by Nonprofit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we'll sit down with nonprofit executives, consultants, and technology partners to learn more about the latest tactics, strategies, and trends in the nonprofit sector. As always, you can download all Nonprofit Voice episodes on Apple, Google, and Spotify. To be the first to know of new episode releases, follow us on social media and subscribe to our e-newsletter.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Mark Becker here, founding partner of Cathexis Partners. And today we are joined by Dave Raley, who's going to be talking about a bunch of different things, but primarily about his upcoming book, I'm guessing. So, Dave, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Happy to do it. Dave Raley, founder of a advisory firm called Imago Consulting. By the way, Imago is Latin, in case you were curious. Everyone's like, how do you pronounce that? And it's like Imago,
I get that all the time with Cathexis too, and that's a real word. That's Greek in origin. I thought it was Latin initially, but it turns out it's Greek.
So we brought this on ourselves, Mark.
We did.
But Imago, by the way, is Latin. It's this idea. It's the root of the word imagination or image. And an imago in Latin is literally like a butterfly, like it's a final form of a thing that will be, but does not yet exist. And so that's what we do at Imago, is essentially help nonprofit leaders or businesses that work with nonprofits see a future that will be, but does not yet exist. So part of that, Mark, is I do a lot of speaking and writing on really what waves are coming in our space and what can we do to understand and recognize how either culture or consumer trends or business trends are actually impacting philanthropy, and then what charities can do to essentially take advantage of those quote unquote waves. So I write
I like how you tied that in there.
Yeah, you do. I do write a weekly article called The Wave Report. And yes, I am a failed former Southern California surfer. Not very good, but there are some lessons it turns out we can learn from the world of waves in terms of just how to take advantage of growing ourselves and our organizations.
Yeah, definitely a great thought leader in the space, and also check out his podcast, Purpose and Profit, as well. But I think the main attraction today is your upcoming book release, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if this is a video podcast, but I've got a little thing here that says there is a generosity crisis in North America, and the good news is we can do something about it.
The name of the book is it's got a lot of words, but the main title is The Rise of Sustainable Giving, right?
Yep. The Rise of Sustainable Giving. And for me, the very concrete topic for the book, for those that are in fundraising, is essentially recurring giving or regular giving, depending on which continent you're from. But it is really focused on what's happening in North America specifically, in philanthropy, and how the subscription economy has transformed the way we consume, in terms of just, subscriptions are everywhere, Mark.
Yeah, they are.
Has subsequently began to transform. And I would say over the last 5 years, we've seen charities really be able to take advantage of an entirely new wave of recurring giving. And this is the key thing, and the reason I wrote the book, is it's different than your grandfather's recurring giving program. Is that how the Buick commercial went? Was it Buick or Oldsmobile?
Oh boy.
You know what I'm talking about?
Those. Yeah, I do.
Not your grandfather's Oldsmobile or whatever that terrible
Buick, I think. Yeah.
ad campaign was. But recurring giving has been changing, and so hence I wanted to write a book about how it's been changing and how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and you get into kind of what shifts have happened due to the subscription economy. Anything you kind of want to highlight there from the book?
The subscription economy is changing, and so the second part of the book is specifically lessons we can apply from subscriptions, from the world of subscriptions, to recurring giving. So I'll give you for example. One of the main premises behind subscription businesses is the offering of ongoing value to the customer. So I was just listening this morning before we got on, Mark, to my favorite, one of my favorite subscriptions, and that is Spotify. I love Spotify, Mark, but it's not because I'm basically renting music. If you would have told me 10 years ago, Dave, you should subscribe to the music company to rent music, I would have been like, no, I've got my music collection. I've got my MP3s. I'm just barely young enough, Mark, to have had a collection of MP3s. Others would be thinking, no, I remember my CD collection or my cassette tape collection, or so on
Oh
and so forth.
yeah.
And but the trick is Spotify understands that it needs to provide an ongoing value proposition and experience that people need on an ongoing basis. So it does things like content discovery, because it's wonderful to be able to listen to music, but I love that moment when I get introduced to a new artist that I've never even heard of, or a new song, right? It's not the traditional olden days. So one of the things we need to think about as nonprofit leaders is, in our recurring giving program, why should somebody not only give to this charity and not to another charity, or not at all, but why should they give on an ongoing, month after month, typically,
Mm-hmm.
basis? And that is a different, quote unquote, value proposition than the kind of offers that will get you a good single gift, where you might have a disaster or a, holiday meal campaign, right? But why would somebody then give to you in January and February and March? And so we go through, I have a chapter on 6 different lessons, shifts that are driven by the subscription economy, and what charities can learn from that.
I like it, and you get into the details of kind of designing and launching the program, and then growing it once it's going on as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to just write the book, as I mean, I did want to write the book to say basically, hey, times are changing and we need to change with them. But I also understand that the moment a nonprofit leader understands that they can create ongoing recurring giving program, the next question is how. And a lot of those fundamentals of building and growing a thriving sustainer program are so critical. And so the third part of the book is on basically designing and building and managing a thriving recurring giving program, and walks through essentially 7 different steps, from benchmarking and understanding where you are today, how much, how many donors do you have today, what they're giving, what percentage of revenue. I recommend some metrics to use, all the way through basically cultivating and scaling the program. So it's really meant to be, seminal is too strong a word, but it's meant to be not just a, hey guys, there's this thing called the subscription economy, you should pay attention to it, but it's actually also meant to be a practical guide to actually building and growing a thriving
Yeah.
recurring program.
I did read it, and it's great, and it's definitely got a lot of valuable tips in it and a lot of usable things. So well done there.
Thank you.
And then you get into the part that's near to dear to my heart, which is the whole tech stack, and how do you use technology to support all this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 3 different, tech heavy chapters, we'll call them. One of them is right in that building and growing a thriving sustainer program, and it's about getting your sustainable giving tech stack right. By the way, you know this. You are in that chapter because one of the things that was so important to me was was so important to understand is, what are the people like you, Mark, and like the team at Cathexis doing to actually help understand what good, strong platforms are and what that requires. And the subscription giving rabbit hole is so deep that there are some very specific technical constraints and capabilities you need to understand if you're going to really have a strong recurring giving program. The way I say it at the beginning of the chapter is, your technology will either be the biggest barrier or best ally to growing your recurring giving program. So technology is not going to solve, it's not going to grow your program, but it sure as heck could limit your program, or it can boost your program if you get your technology right. And so you were so helpful in the research for that. And so that chapter is all about getting your tech stack right. And then in the 4th part of the book, the final part of the book, I talk about how sustainable giving is continuing to evolve, because the reality is, I thought, man, if I write the book now, what if things change? Well, it turns out, Mark, things always do change and evolve and grow over time. And so I wrote the 4th part of the book about, how I see sustainable giving changing and what we see in the marketplace, and 2 technical chapters on that. Number 1 is technical advancement is going to continue. I just saw a study recently that said that I think it was 52%, more than 50% of US adults prefer to use digital wallets when doing retail shopping, I think was the context. A digital wallet, by the way, is that thing like on my iPhone when I double click the power button and it brings up my Apple card and my Bank of America card, right? So that would be an example of a
Just
digital
over
wallet.
half, huh?
Yep,
I'm
just
surprised
over
it's
half.
just not. Yeah, I'm sure that's
Not
going
even
to
higher. Yeah.
continue to tip, right?
Yeah. You've got the Venmos and the PayPals, which can act
Mhm.
essentially as digital wallets. So, for example, today, what are you doing to think about, providing digital wallet, payment capabilities, right? Those are things that charities need to start thinking about. So I wrote a chapter on that. And then it's hard to write a book in, the mid 2020s and not talk about artificial intelligence. So I do have an
Right.
entire chapter on how I see AI transforming recurring giving and specifically the implications of that.
Yeah, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it was all just about making sure that there's a way to track. You were pretty impressed if you had a platform that could track and let you know that the credit card expiration date is coming up soon, and that was
Yeah.
the that was
Advanced
the big thing.
technology. And now it's
But
like, do you have an auto updater that actually proactively just changes that expiration date? Or you know better than I do, but like there's just so much advanced tech that's I feel like, and Mark, you've been in this space. I'm curious as to your thoughts, but technology always starts in this sort of like, well, there's the early part of tech, which is really messy and it's only like the avant-garde. There's a lot of risk, to implementing a new tech. And then there's a stage where it's like only available to the enterprise. Like it's only available in this
mhm,
case, right, to charities with, $100 million or more, or, 10,000
right.
donors or more. But then inevitably the technology becomes available, right? Democratized, whatever the term is, to those that can't afford a enterprise license for whatever. And that's the beauty of a lot of the tech these days is it's becoming available to that charity that has 100 donors or 100 recurring donors or 500 recurring donors, and it's accessible. Is that what you found?
Yeah, totally. And even around the subject of AI and just building in those pieces where it goes into and starting to even make up suggested recurring or journeying of email campaigns. By no means should you just say, "Yep, hit enter and accept all that," but it just takes so much time out of it to allow people to look at a framework and customize it, personalize it, and really get their message across. And then also conditionalize it and personalize it to each individual person, right? How much are they giving? What else are they doing with the organization? And all of that just is feeding in, and it's the things that the marketers all want to do, and now it's getting easier to streamline, including all of that into your messaging without a ton of hours to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I mean, it's been so encouraging. Even, I remember Mark the first before I've been doing fundraising and marketing for about 20 years now. Prior to that, I had started and ran a longboard skateboard company, which is a whole separate conversation.
I
But
like
I
it.
remember doing quote unquote entrepreneurship back then. And I remember thinking, oh, it's not that hard to start a business because you like just go to the Secretary of State website and you file for a license. And like I remember thinking, oh, that sounds really scary to do that thing, but it's more accessible than ever before. Well, fast forward 20 years, it's like, and this is a technology comment, it's like thankfully the maturity of this area, this sector is coming really into its own, and it's becoming more accessible, more available. And that's why, one of the reasons I wrote the book is historically 75% of charities have been left behind when it comes to recurring giving because they essentially don't have what I would call a one-to-one model, where they can do like a sponsorship style program, or membership is the other big one historically, right? I give as a donor on a recurring basis, but I also receive benefits. I can, if it's a public television station, I'm actually getting to consume the content, or content oriented organizations. The vast majority of charities, though, don't have membership benefits, right, that they can offer to recurring donors, and they don't have this one-to-one model. And so 75% of nonprofit leaders have felt left behind. Like, Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if I could build a substantial, growing, recurring, sustainable, giving program, but not me. And that's the reality that has changed over the last 10 years for sure, but I think 5 years has really been the window where it's become really open and an opportunity for charity leaders. So it's more accessible to more charities than at any other time, candidly, in history. And I've done the
Yeah.
research.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, it really stuck out at me when I was reading the book that those kind of three buckets that you puts those models into, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, the sponsorships that totally makes sense. One to one, you're kind of sponsoring a child or a family or what have you, and that model just it makes sense. You're gonna support them on a regular basis, monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever it might be, daily, so much. Bill a day, and then memberships totally make sense, right? And then yeah, there's everybody else. I wonder if you'll do like a second version of the book in a few years, and there'll be several more different categories that like food or healthcare or others have put together and made kind of a model out of.
It will be interesting. And that was actually one of the pieces of permission I really needed to start writing the book in the first place. A friend of mine, Peter Greer, some of our listeners will know who he is, both the CEO of Hope International, but also Peter himself has co-written, I think, 14 books now. So accomplished, and they're very good books like Rooting for
Mm-hmm.
Rivals, Mission Drift, like some really kind of bestsellers in the space. And I remember it was Mark about 2 years ago. I was speaking to Peter and I said, when do you know when to start writing words? And like, because I just felt like, okay, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been speaking about this and seeing this trend for 8 years at this point, 2 years ago. And I feel like if I start writing, what if I'm wrong or what if things change? Like I really did not want to put something into the world that might be either misleading or unhelpful or whatever, right? And Peter was so helpful. He didn't answer my question directly, but he said, Dave, think about it this way: based on what you know today, what is the likelihood here, and by the time the book comes out, that essentially your ideas will either be wrong or outdated or like incomplete, right? And in that
Mm-hmm.
moment I was like, oh well, relative to the rest of the industry, I know quite a bit about this space, so maybe 5%, 10%. But to your point, about future editions, we'll see. But it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean a book can't have a revised and updated edition or a part two or whatever. And that's why I wrote part four of the book, which is here's 6 areas that I see that are continuing to evolve. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to invalidate the reality of what a strong recurring giving program looks like or what the
Exactly.
subscription economy has changed, but it will evolve, right? And so
Yep.
how do we understand that?
The fundamentals are still there, and you got all the foundation kind of spelt out in the book. Well done. So, any final tips?
I think that the one of the highest level things, and I hinted at before, is to benchmark where you are today. I think some
Mm-hmm.
folks listening to this know exactly where they are. Already they already calculate their monthly recurring revenue and their annual recurring revenue, and they can say, yes, Dave, our monthly recurring revenue is X. We have Y number of recurring donors. But I would venture to guess, Mark, that the majority of people listening today couldn't say those, like, don't have those numbers at the tip of their tongue, right, at the tip of their brain. So the first thing I would say is if you are even intrigued by this idea of what could be possible with recurring giving, first thing to do is just ask how many and how much. Like, how many recurring donors do we have today, like active, not ever or all time, right? How many recurring donors do we have today? And then how much are they giving? And I like to express that both in a monthly and annual number. So it's $10,000 a month or $2,000 a month or $1 million a month or whatever it is. How much are we bringing in on MRR or ARR, which technology firms are very familiar with because subscriptions basically live and die on monthly
Mm-hmm.
recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue. But nonprofit leaders, I think, need to take advantage of that. Once you know where you are, then I think you can then start to chart a path forward to say, like, okay, we're here. What is relative to where we are starting today? What does growth look like? And You can then evaluate your program, take a look at your program, and then really design it. Think about it more like you might think about your major gifts program or your planned giving program. It needs its own sort of strategy. It's complementary to all the other fundraising, but it really does deserve its own capability.
Best of luck in the launch, and really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thank you. I mean, this podcast is really invested in the space, and I'm just grateful for what you're doing. I've enjoyed listening to it myself.
I appreciate that. All right, Dave. Well, yeah, have a good one, and everybody will talk again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. Listen to more episodes at nonprofitpro.com, as well as on Apple, Google, and Spotify.